Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today, I'm joined by three of my friends from the WatchYouWant.com inventory. Three watches that really kind of run the full gamut, showcase the spectrum of modern men's Audemars Piguet Royal Oak references. Now, this is sort of a primer for the full dress Royal Oak Palooza that I'm going to do a little bit later, but I wanted to focus on these three references because they do a great job of conveying a cross-section of what's available from Audemars Piguet today. Now, right here on my right, we've got the original jumbo style 39mm Royal Oak reference 15202ST. Now, this is a contemporary reference, the 2012 to present so-called anniversary reference, but what this one brings to the table that's distinct is that compared to these, and I know it's going to be a little bit ironic that in this company, this watch is the one we call the jumbo, but this watch has a pared down case, the traditional JLC 920 Bausch, here fashioned as Audemars Piguet's in-house manufactured 2120 movement. That's correct. Audemars Piguet now builds that movement in-house. And right here we have what's considered to be sort of the everyday wear version of the Royal Oak, the 15400 ST. Now this is a 41mm watch, automatic winding, very much like the original jumbo, but you'll note the distinction both in size between these two current references, as well as the use of a center seconds hand on the more modern and somewhat more massive Royal Oak 15400 ST. It's built heavier, it's more like a sports watch than its progenitor, and of course both of them are dwarfed by the immense 2010 special edition, one of 1,750 carbon and titanium Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Grand Prix special editions. The funny thing is, the steel watches weigh about the same as the Grand Prix because the combination of forged carbon and titanium components on the immense 44mm Grand Prix conveys lightness on the wrist. Now, I'm going to do a wrist shot of each of these right here, but I want to focus on one of the key distinctions between them, which is that each one represents either a step up or a step down in terms of wrist, feel, and mass. I'm going to start with the jumbo. That's right, the jumbo, a little bit counterintuitively, is the smallest of them. 39mm with a very delicate feel on the wrist. This is the closest to the original 1972 Gerald Genta Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. In terms of proportions, almost exactly the same. Now for 2012, Audemars Piguet sort of went back to formula. They recreated as much of the original as possible, from the pattern of the tapisserie hobnail dial to the relatively low-key matching blue date disc that now blends in seamlessly to the dial. They extended the indices, they moved the AP from the index at 12 down to 6 o'clock, and they really restored a lot of the essential aesthetic of that original while maintaining the proportions almost perfectly. Now the key thing about this watch is that everything on the wrist is just a little bit lighter, more delicate. It's something that really has to be felt in the hand and on the wrist because it isn't entirely conveyed by photographs. This looks very much like a 1300, the previous automatic everyday reference, and the current 15400 that I'm about to show you, the other sort of everyday wear, all-purpose Royal Oak. Now, the latest reference does include a twin-trigger double deployant clasp, so this is probably the most robust clasp ever fitted to a jumbo. But the real highlight of this movement, or this watch I should say, which ties it very much to the original, is the size, the proportions, and this movement. Now, Audemars Piguet builds the 2120. It's their in-house manufactured iteration of what was originally a JLC design from the late 60s. Now, this movement was expressly designed for AP, Patek, and Vacheron. JLC never used it in its own watch. Today, the actual rights to manufacture it, as well as the equipment to make it, reside with Audemars Piguet. Exceptionally thin, this movement featuring a complete circumferential annular winding rotor, weighted on one side, but supported on four corners by ruby rollers. It's a masterpiece that is of a stature comparable to the bracelet, the case, the dial, and the bezel of the Royal Oak. This is as traditional as it gets. Now we move up from jumbo to the standard. This is the current production mainstream Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. That is to say, this is not so much the watch for the connoisseur looking for a vintage experience as the connoisseur looking for a watch that's durable, sturdy, and can be worn more or less with the abandon of a sports watch. It features a 41mm case, burlier proportions. All of the metal elements are just heavier in the hand, a little bit sturdier. The case itself is a millimeter thicker than the 8.3mm thick jumbo that I just showed you, and the bracelet has extra heft in the hand. Everything's built just a little bit heavier, even though the aesthetic is unmistakably Royal Oak. Now, the movement is AP's own in-house caliber 3120. So what you're looking at here is a dual-anchored, free-sprung Gyromax style balance. So very shock resistant. Ceramic rotor bearings give it essentially an indefinite rotor bearing life. Now, bidirectional winding for smoothness on the wrist. It is nevertheless a 60-hour power reserve modern movement with the toughness to go toe-to-toe with the kind of style of wear that modern collectors generally subject their watches to. In the era of Rolex, everyone's kind of had to raise their game so that their mainstream sports watches can be worn with that same sense of abandon and everyday versatility. But if you really want to play rough, there's only one solution, and that is to go offshore. Here we see the 2010 Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Grand Prix limited edition. This is one of 1,750 made with the forged carbon and titanium trim. Now, this is considered to be one of the great modern offshore references, one of the few definitive pieces. So I chose it to stand alongside the current reference 15400 and the classical Jumbo. And the key thing here is it's almost twice as thick as the Jumbo, at about 16 millimeters thick compared to 8.3 for the Jumbo. This thing is going to stand loud and proud even on the biggest of wrists. But you can see that it's a nice fit. Now, this is uncommon because the larger offshores rarely fit my 6 1/3 inch, 16 centimeter wrist securely, but with this wonderful calfskin as opposed to hornback alligator leather, it's more pliant, it's more supple, it bends around a small wrist more easily. And lug to lug, you can see the watch isn't exactly a giant, although it is a giant in terms of total wrist real estate occupied, and a big part of that is the motorsports inspiration of the watch. Now you can see the automobile exhaust stack style rectangular pushers. That was an innovation first unveiled on Audemars Piguet's Richard Mille designed Juan Montoya Offshore Limited Edition in the early 2000s. It's made its way throughout the line, but on the Rubens Barrichello 2 and the Grand Prix, it really kind of reached its apogee in terms of integrated styling. The elements, everything from the auto lugnut style bezel bolts to the dashboard instrument inspired dial, really scream Formula One motorsports race car cockpit. So this is, although definitely flamboyant extrovert, a standout in every way, and styled to be seen, this is a remarkably cohesive and fully realized design effort, much like that original Jumbo. Each one is remarkably effective at achieving its design goals. In this case, a beautiful watch that integrates elements of a jewelry bracelet, a sports watch, and high horology. In the case of this one, a no-holds-barred fusion of advanced materials and Formula One imagery. But in so many ways, it's that ability to channel its source material, the original inspiration, in this case, the portholes of a Royal Navy warship, in this case, modern Formula One cars, that unites them. These are both Royal Oaks, and just like the 15400 that's just off screen, they serve a specific purpose within the Royal Oak catalog and within the House of Audemars Piguet. That's not just one common sort of thread that binds, but so is the finishing. Although the materials here are unconventional and the materials here are thoroughly traditional, each one is beautifully hand finished. Neither one of these is a machine-made watch, and that's what you're really getting. Despite the aesthetic disparities, both of these are crafted with equal competence in the realm of top-tier high horology. You can see them both, and if you so choose, drive or sail home these Audemars Piguet Royal Oaks on our website, watchyouwant.com.